Hello everyone. I'm Anna from GreenGeeks, and thank you for joining us today in this webinar. It's presented by Nathan Ingram, dealing with problem clients, building fences around friendly monsters. I'm going to introduce Nathan in a moment. Glad to have you here, Nathan, today. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Glad to be here.
Great. Real quick, I want to say a couple of words about GreenGeeks for those of you who are watching who are not familiar with us. We're a 300% GreenGeeks, 300% green energy web hosting provider, which essentially means we put back 3 times the amount of power we consume into the grid in the form of renewable energy. We have been recognized by the US EPA since 2009 as a green power partner. We offer share hosting, reseller hosting, VPS, and dedicated servers. So now moving on to the fun stuff, the webinar, a few housekeeping items. If you could put your question in the Q&A section of the webinar so that Nathan can, reply later after his presentation. You can chat in the chat room, but remember to select all panelists and attendees if you want everybody to see what you're discussing. And we're recording this, so if you have to step away, don't worry. We're going to be sending this recording to you in the next couple of days. So finally, at the end of the webinar, we're going to have a raffle for 5 books, 5 of Nathan's books dealing with problem clients, fencing in the friendly monsters. So now I'm going to introduce Erica. Erica is from our team. She will be helping us with the raffle and with the chat. Hey Erica, welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Anna. Hi, Anna and Nathan and everyone. My name is Erica Barbosa. I am from Costa Rica. I am computer engineer and also I work in the partners team at GreenGeeks. I'm going to be in the chat, reading your comments and sharing some information. And I hope you enjoy this webinar with Nathan and learn a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica. Thanks for helping out. Oh, now I'm going to introduce Nathan. Nathan is a growth coach for WordPress business owners. As the founder of Advanced Coaching, he works with WordPress solopreneurs and agency owners individually and in groups to help them become more successful in their businesses. Nathan is also the creator of Master Contracts, a service that provides contracts for WordPress client work that are battle tested, attorney analyzed, annually audited, and member strengthened. As the host at iTeams Training, Nathan teaches WordPress, technical subjects, and freelance business development topics via live webinar. He has been working with clients to build websites since 1995 and is based in Birmingham, Alabama, where he has been also an organizer for WordCamp Birmingham, for several years. So Nathan, welcome. Do you want to dive into the webinar, say something about yourself that I haven't said? Anything else?
No, I'm just really glad to be here with you folks today. It's good to see Anna and Erica. It's been a long time since we've seen each other in person since the pandemic, but I've had the privilege of hanging out with both of you guys at WordCamps and even going to and spending some time with Erica in Costa Rica. When was that? 2019, I guess. That was a lot of fun.
That was a long time ago.
It seems like forever ago, right? But I'm really excited to be here and talking to the GreenGeeks community about this subject because it's, in my opinion, it's a very important subject in dealing with problem clients. I love freelancers and business owners. If you have your own business and your thing is working with clients and building websites, you are my tribe. And I love people who are involved in that kind of work. I believe that freedom comes from owning your own business and being in control of your own time and your own life and your own priorities. And for the last several years, I've had the privilege of interacting with thousands of people in the WordPress community who are business owners across the United States and around the world at live events like WordCamps and in online training events like this one, and in one-on-one and group coaching calls as well. And from those thousands of conversations, one thing that I've learned is that many web business owners are one more bad client away from calling it quits and throwing in the towel. They've just had enough of working with problem clients. And it's really a shame because most client problems can be mitigated or eliminated by good systems and processes. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. Anna gave me a great introduction a minute ago. I am from Birmingham, Alabama, down in the southeastern part of the United States. I've been a web business owner since 1995, so 26 years now. I've been building websites for clients. And I am a growth coach for WordPress business owners. I love to help people solve business problems and grow their businesses. So for about the next 45 minutes or so, here's what we're going to be covering. We're going to talk, first of all, about the concept of the friendly monster and how our clients are friendly monsters. Then we're going to look at the idea of building fences to keep those friendly monsters contained. And then last of all, 4 monsters you need to be aware of and how to use these fences to keep them contained so that they don't trample all over the rest of your world. Now, like Anna mentioned, this is a book. I turned this talk into a book a couple of years ago, and we'll be sending some autographed copies of those to whoever they draw for the raffle. I'm kind of excited about that. That's fun. It's a fun little book to read. All right, so clients are friendly monsters. That's the main idea of the talk today. And in order to deal with problem clients effectively, you have to build fences around them, business systems to protect yourselves from friendly monsters, because every friendly monster has the potential to transform into a not so friendly monster. And so there are at least 4 areas that I think we need to deal with in our businesses, no matter what the kind of work you do with clients involves. And even if it's not website work, this deals with any kind of client in any kind of business. There are at least 4 walls, 4 fences that we need to build around our clients with good systems and processes. There may be more than this for a particular kind of business, but every business needs at least these 4. And the first is clarity. We've got to get to clarity with the client, and we're going to talk about each one of these in more detail. But the first is clarity, and then commitments. The third, communication, and the fourth, documentation. So we need good systems and processes that put these 4 fences around our clients. Otherwise, they can transform into something not so friendly and really kind of run all over the rest of our world. So let's talk about each one of these fences in particular and how we might start to develop those or strengthen those fences in our business. And by the way, especially if you've been in business for a little while, you may find that you're doing a lot of these things, but each one of these areas, there's always the opportunity to do a little bit better. Like I've been in business for 26 years now, and I'm still improving my processes, still improving my fences. And really, everything that I'm going to talk about today, most of it comes from some mistake that I've made over the years. Like there's always an opportunity to get better. And so hopefully we can do that together. So the first of the fences is clarity. Clarity is critical so that we understand each other and what the expectations are. And one of the main places where I see clarity start to fall apart is that it's this: agreement does not equal clarity. In my experience, the most common reason that the relationship with a client can suffer is a lack of clarity. Like there's not clarity. You're not seeing eye to eye on something. And don't confuse agreement with clarity. There can be agreement without clarity. There's no meeting of the minds. Sometimes we maybe use technical jargon that the client doesn't understand. And they may nod their head yes, like they understand, but they really don't have any idea of what we're talking about. Or they're not quite clear. Or maybe they have a different understanding of a term that we use. And so their expectations are completely different than our expectations. We think we're being clear, but they are not so clear. Sometimes also, the client doesn't tell you everything. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience while working with a client, but maybe you get into the project. And here's a good example from a few years ago. I was working with someone in a coaching situation, and they were just about ready to launch the website. And they were reviewing the project with the client, like it's ready to launch tomorrow. And the client says, oh, wait a minute. Where do my customers log in to view their account? Wait a minute. We didn't talk anything about, oh, yeah, well, they should be able to log in and view their statements and all these things. Well, wait a minute. That's not in the scope of work. You haven't brought that up at all. But the client had this assumption that this would just be something that would happen. It's a website, right? So they should be able to log in and see their account. Now, sometimes the client doesn't tell you everything. And when that happens, whose fault is it? I would say it's at least 50-50, because as professional web developers, one of the skills that we need to develop, not just knowing WordPress and knowing a page builder, knowing maybe some HTML and CSS, maybe some JavaScript or whatever. One of the soft skills that we need to develop is the skill of asking great questions. So if you ask great questions, you begin to uncover and peel back all these layers of assumption that can really muddy the water and keep you from getting to clarity with the client. And by the way, if you learn the skill of asking great questions, that skill can set you apart from other web developers that you might be competing with. So learn to ask that skill of great questions, because assumptions create confusion. A lack of clarity often comes from assumptions. What does the client assume that you're going to do? What are you assuming the client is going to do? So you have to look at your process. Do you have a way that you work with clients to build websites? Like it's written out, like there's a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Or do you kind of do every project by the seat of your pants? Are you kind of making it up as you go along? All of us made it up as we went along at the beginning, at least. But one of the things I encourage my coaching clients to do is very quickly develop some consistency in the way you work with clients. And as you look at your system, you'll start to find, oh, there's an assumption here. The client's assuming I'm going to do this. I need to be more clear about that. Or I'm assuming the client is going to do this, and I need to be more clear about that. One of the best places that this kind of assumption happens is who's going to create the content for the website. The client may say, well, I'm hiring you as a web developer, so I'm just going to pay you money and you should make this website appear. Like I'm going to wave like you can wave a magic wand as a web developer and boom, there's a website. Like, where are the words going to come from? Where the pictures going to come from? All of that. The client may assume that you're going to write all those things, and you may assume the client is going to provide that. Either way, there's got to be clarity there, however you're going to deal with it. So you have to be specific to create clarity. And there's some opportunities to do this in a good system for your business, like maybe running every client through an intake form where you're asking questions that my intake form, I continue to refine it over the years. I just added a couple of questions a couple of months ago, and I've been doing this forever. So an intake form, so you're asking every client that comes in gets the same set of questions so that you don't miss anything. By the way, if you don't have a checklist of questions that you ask to every client, every project, every time, you are bound to forget to ask something. And Murphy's Law says that the one thing you forget to ask is going to be the most important thing you should have asked about that project. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. So anyway, a good clear intake form where you're asking the same questions, a clear scope of work that defines, what you're going to do for the amount of money you're being paid. So it's very clear what they're paying you to do. And by the way, a fantastic contract that is very clear on how your process works. So they're agreeing to your process and the order in which you do things in the contract. And then it may have different scenarios, like what happens if the client disappears on you, or they delay the project for 30, 60, 90 days, 2 years, some crazy length of time. What do you do in that situation? What if the client doesn't pay? What if you need to fire the client? What happens in that case? What are you responsible for if you're managing their website? What can they expect as far as search engine optimization or compliance with privacy rules or accessibility? Those may all be things the client is expecting you to do, and there's some assumptions that have been made, and maybe you're not on the same page. That's where clarity is so very critical, and a good contract will help you do that. All right, the second fence is the fence of commitments. And commitments in dealing with a client are so very important because all healthy relationships are based on healthy commitments. So whether that's, it's really any relationship in your life that is healthy has a healthy commitment back and forth. What I've discovered in working with people who work with clients is that a lot of folks have never thought about the client relationship in these terms. they've never thought about it being mutual commitment back and forth. For me, for example, for years, like the client commitment was they signed the check. And now, I'm getting paid to do something I enjoy and I'm happy about it. And I'm just going to put on my Superman costume and make everything happen, cape and all. And I'm just going to do everything I can to get this project built and, spend way too much time probably and not charge enough money, all those things. Anyway, what I learned over the years is that really, if you're going to be successful long-term with a client, they ask you for some things, you ask them for some things, and it's back and forth and back and forth. And the client, by the way, needs to understand and have clarity on the commitments that you're going to ask them to make. So when I meet with a client for the first time, I talk about, well, there's a deposit that comes in. That's a financial commitment. And then you're going to have to help us work through the content of the site, whether you're going to generate the content yourself or work with our writer to help you generate the content. But you're going to have to commit back some work to us before we can go any further. And then we're going to do, and I've got a visual for the process up here in a minute, but the client needs to understand what the commitments are that you need for them to make. And then as part of having a good business, we need to design a process that includes opportunities for the client to commit at key points. So there's not just one commitment, like they hire you. That's not it. There's a series of commitments along the way. And the best way that I've found to represent this is a board game. We used to, when I was growing up as a kid, we used to play board games on Friday night as a family. That was always a lot of fun. And so here's this great graphic. It's a board game. And this is the client website board game. And you can see there's different colors along the pathway as you go through this little city. And each one of those are a different phase of the process. So for example, this is what my process looks like in my web agency as I work with clients. So the first step is the first contact. And this is where they're reaching out through a contact form or they're calling us on the phone. And one of the first things that I'm going to talk about when I first have a conversation with a client by email or by phone is they need to understand that the minimum price to work with us is this much dollars. Like if they're looking for a $500 website, I mean, there's people that'll do that, but that's not us. So there's a minimum price they need to understand. So before I spend any more time, and I'm talking about like 5 minutes of time may go by before we get to that first price point. I'm not going to spend any more time with that particular potential client until they at least make a commitment that, okay, I understand that it's going to be at least this much to work with you. Okay. That's the first contact. If they pass that minimum price, then we'll go into the intake conversation or that initial consultation with the client. And in that conversation, I ask a bunch of questions that are on a good list, and we clarify what the scope of work is going to be. And at the end of that conversation, I'm going to give them a ballpark price that's usually, maybe $1,000 range. Like, based on everything you've said, this sounds like a $5,000 to $6,000 project. If I bring you back a proposal tomorrow in that price range, are you ready to start? See, one of the mistakes that I made a long time ago for years and wasted so much time was I'd meet with a client and I'd put a proposal together and I'd sit there worried about the price point, and I'd go back and forth, maybe a little bit, inching it up $100 here, $100 there. And then, I would spend hours on this proposal and send it to the client and they come back and say, what do you mean $5,000? I thought this was going to be like $1,000, and so I've wasted all this time writing a proposal when really we weren't even in the same ballpark. So before I spend any more time, like at this point, look, I've spent some time with them on the phone or the email. I've spent about an hour with them at this consultation, and I'm not going to spend another couple of hours writing a proposal until they have made a commitment back to me of saying it's going to be within this ballpark. And if it's in this range of pricing, then yes, I'm ready to go. All right. If they agree to that, then I'll put a proposal and contract together for them with no surprises. It's the scope of work we talked about. The price is in the range that we talked about. And here's the contract that's going to set the pace for how we work together. Now, at that point, they are going to either sign the contract or, hopefully they sign the contract, and they're going to provide a deposit, right? So I work at least 50% up front. No, I don't do any work unless we have half up front. So they're committing by signing these two documents and providing a deposit. Now we move into the content stage. So we do all the content first. So, one of the biggest mistakes that I made through my years of website development is trying to do design before content. And what I found a lot of times was I would get stuck on design. And I heard somebody really smart. I wish I could remember who this was, but it was at some word camp somewhere. Somebody said, design problems are really content problems in disguise. And I thought, that is brilliant, because that's exactly right. Like, if I get stuck on design, it's because I don't have the right content. I don't know what I'm designing for. So we moved all the content to the beginning, and we don't begin to do design until 100% of all the content, that's words, photos, videos, downloadable, all that stuff is in-house. Then we create a design into the next phase. So we go through here, they've signed the document, provided a deposit, they've given us their content, or we've worked with them with our writer to produce content. Then we move into design, and we'll give them a couple of mock-ups of a couple of different pages. They're going to sign off on that, because what you don't want is to be ready to launch and the client is now going back and talking about colors and typography. That's a problem. You don't want to do that. So design comes first, they sign off on that. Then we move into development, where we're actually building out the website. Now, if we go backwards at all, like if we're in development and they want to adjust the design, going backwards on the map costs money. Going backwards in the process costs money, and that's in the contract that they have to agree to. So we develop the website, then we hand it over to them for review and testing. We walk them through it and let them play around with it a little bit, make sure there's anything that needs to be dealt with. Then we move into launch, where they're going to pay the final remainder of the balance. And then we move into a website management phase, where each month we're providing hosting and WordPress management and that sort of thing. So this is my process. And this is an example of giving the client opportunities to commit. You see all those opportunities to make commitments back and forth there are in this process? You do that, and by the end of the project, you've built a really good, healthy relationship with this client, hopefully, and they stay with you long-term because they've learned they can trust you. All right, so as you look at commitments, you also have to clearly define expectations and consequences. So keeping the client informed about where you are in the process. You know, this is what you can expect for us coming up. By the way, it's been now 30 days since we haven't gotten content from you. And if it goes another week, then we're going to have to put your project on pause, and there's a reactivation fee, or whatever your particular way of handling that is. So commitments are explained as well, which leads us into the next fence, which is communication. Communication with the client throughout the course of the project is critical. And there's this great quote I found from George Bernard Shaw that says, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has occurred. A lot of times we think we've communicated and we haven't. And I found that to be true so many times. Like, you can tell the same client the same thing 100 times, and that client doesn't stay told, as my grandmother used to say. They don't stay told. You can tell them, but they don't stay told. Anyhow, so we have to be clear about that, and just work some things into our process so that we are over communicating to the client, because few things can improve the client's experience more than clear, regular communication. Now, this is another one of those soft skills, like asking great questions. If you can learn to be a good communicator with your clients, that will set you apart from other people working with clients to build websites. Now, here's why communication is so important. Because if you're not communicating with the client, they tend to make assumptions, and usually they assume the worst. And that's a problem. It's a lot better to just gradually, keep the client informed along the way than have to do a bunch of damage control working backwards. So here's how that usually works out. See if this situation sounds familiar. You're building a website for a client and you hit a problem, something you didn't expect. The classic example of this, and I always use in this talk, is you're building an e-commerce website and you're trying to get the stupid connector between some shipping service and WooCommerce to connect, and there's all kinds of problems with the API and nothing is working, and you're on this for days and you can't figure it out, right? Now, when those sorts of problems happen, those unexpected problems that have taken you days to solve that you hadn't anticipated, what do? If you're like most of us, what you do is you go hide in the cave and you don't check your, you just pray that the client doesn't email you. Like, I'm not going to take their call. I don't want to really respond to their email. Maybe they won't reach out to me at all. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. It's much better to communicate with a client, even if it's not positive news, it's better to communicate that gradually than it is to surprise them with it all of a sudden when their project isn't ready to launch. And so one of the systems that I put in place in my business years ago, I learned this from my friend Erin Flynn, who's brilliant. She has a business in Colorado. She does education and also website building. She introduced me to the strategy that I call the Friday email strategy. It's a simple email that goes out to all my clients every Friday. So every Friday afternoon, they get a wrap-up email. It's 3 sentences. It's past, present, future. If it takes longer than a minute or two to write it, you're writing too much. And here's how it goes. Past, first sentence. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is where we are. This is what we did on your project this week. This has been accomplished. Present tense. This is where things are now in terms of the project completion. Future tense. This is what we're going to be working on next week. And if you have any other comments or concerns, just let me know. Have a great weekend. It's a simple, quick email, and it just keeps clients in the loop. And this email is the place to communicate. You know, this week we had trouble getting your website to connect to Federal Express for shipping. Next week, we're going to be hopefully getting support back, reply back from support, and getting that problem solved. This may delay the launch of your site about a week. We'll try to make up some time on the other side, but just be aware this may be a problem. If you have any questions or concerns, let us know. Have a great weekend. All right, just very simple. Keep them in the loop of where their project stands. If you do that, it's going to set you apart from other developers because most people are not doing this. All right, fourth and final fence is the fence of documentation. Documentation is critical because if you don't document, you're relying on your own memory, which if you're like me, you tend to forget things, or worse, you're relying on the client's memory. So get used to communicating in writing. Now, if you're like me, I do a lot of communication with my client in person. Well, not now, but usually, when it's not a global pandemic, or a Zoom call, or in person, or over the phone. I tend to work a lot more closely and hands-on with my clients. And that's good because it gives personal service. It's bad because decisions made in a meeting face-to-face or over Zoom or verbal over the phone, you can't refer back to those. You're relying on memory. So get used to communicating in writing because written communication is referenceable. So if there's a decision that's made verbally in a call or a meeting, you simply send a quick email to the client to confirm that. So thanks for the call today. Really enjoyed it. This is what you agreed to do. This is what I agreed to do. If any questions or problems, just let me know. It's just a quick email to shoot that. You don't even have to have the client respond to it. It's just a summary email that if someone, 3 weeks up the road, if the client forgets that they were supposed to do this and they thought you were going to do it, you can refer back to that email you sent and said, remember, we talked about this in that call. Here's the email where I sent that out. And so written communication is referenceable, and implement a system that can easily capture all your project communication. Don't just use email because inevitably you'll be looking for some little bit of agreement or something from the client that's 18 levels deep in a 50-level email thread, and you'll never be able to find it when you need it. So use something like a project management software like Basecamp or Teamwork or Evernote or Asana or a CRM or something, some tool that you like. There's no perfect answer for everybody. It's just the one that you like to capture your project communication. The best system is the one that you will actually use on a consistent basis. And actually use is a really big part of this because, I call myself a geek. I lovingly call myself a geek. And if you're like me and you identify as a geek, we have this thing that we do where we will research a problem for 6 months and create some elaborate solution and then never use it. And that will happen a lot of times when it comes to project communication. So just pick a system and start using it and keep using it, be consistent, and then you'll always be able to find your stuff. So those are the 4 fences. There may be others that you feel like you need to implement, but at least these 4 need to be in place: clarity, commitments, communication, and documentation. Now, there's one thing I want to leave you with before we move into the next section, which is the 4 monsters you need to know. And that is, don't tear down your own fences. I cannot tell you how many times I have this conversation in coaching situations. And this is also so very important if you are a nice person. And I'm going to assume that you're a nice person. If you're a nice person, then what you tend to do by default is you tend to let clients weasel out of the commitments that they've made to you and weasel out from the process that they agreed to and the language in your contract that they agreed to. And we'll make excuses in our minds for the client to avoid confrontation. Oh, it's not really that big of a deal. Well, they're really paying me a lot. Well, maybe they'll do it better next time. And we let the client weasel out of the commitment that they made. Now, here's the thing. If you spend the time to build your business systems and you have all these processes and a great a set of fences to build around the client to keep them in check, you've built the fences, you have a process, and the client breaks the rules. If your tendency is to be nice and give them another chance, what you need to realize is that you can hold the client to their commitment and still be a nice person. Don't break your own rules. Don't tear down your fences, because this is what's going to happen. If you are in the situation and the client wants to weasel out of the commitment that they've made, then here's what starts to happen. Like immediately you say, well, okay, well, they're paying me a lot, or okay, we'll just let it slide this one time. And you pat yourself on the back for great customer support. But then that feels good for a minute. But about 10 minutes later, that good feeling that you get starts to turn a little bit. And it turns into frustration. And that frustration kind of turns into a little bit of anger. And maybe that anger turns into a little bit of bitterness. And by the end of the day, and you're going home, you're just mad. I can't believe that client did it. And you start to speak sharply to your family and maybe be mean to the dog or whatever. And what happens is, instead of forcing a stranger to live with the consequences their choices have earned, we end up taking it out on the people who are closest to us. And that's just crazy. It's crazy. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. So that's why I say build the fences and then don't tear them down. They're there for a reason. You can simply remind the client, this is our process. This is what you agreed to. And we'll talk more about that with some of these problem clients. You can still be a nice person and maintain the integrity of your fences. All right, so let's move into the second half of the talk, which is the 4 monsters you should know. There's a monster, by the way, that corresponds to each of the fences that we just talked about. There's more kinds of monsters, but there are at least these. And if you've worked with clients for any length of time, probably you've met each one of these kinds of clients I'm about to introduce you to. Now, by the way, there are great clients out there. I've got some really great clients, especially if they happen to be watching this video. They're wonderful clients. There's also some terrible clients out there who don't care about you. They don't treat you fairly. They'll walk all over you if you let them. That's why we have to build fences. So let's talk about the first of these clients that can become a real problem, and that is the one I call the invisible man. Now, here's what the invisible man looks like and how you can tell you're dealing with an invisible man. And by the way, these are gender neutral. Like there's also invisible women, but gender is not an issue here. They come in all flavors. So this is how you can tell you're dealing with an invisible man. This is the kind of client, like they call you up or they send you this email and they're super interested. Like we need a website. We got it. We were excited about it. And then boom, they're gone. They've just disappeared into the ether. Or they schedule a meeting with you and then they reschedule it and they reschedule it again. Or you send them an email and they're super excited. And then it's like 2 weeks before you hear from them again. So the invisible man, I see these kinds of people all the time because I work with a lot of professionals and business owners. And what I've learned over the years is that that's the kind of client this tends to be. A business owner who is super busy, or a busy professional like a successful lawyer, a successful accountant, or whatever. They're well-intentioned. They want to build a website. They're just busy. And when they reach out to you the first time, at that moment, the website is the top priority. But then tomorrow, one of their other 30 top priorities is the top priority. And like there's not enough of them to go around. And so they just end up kicking the project down the road. The website falls down from that top priority slot. Now, here's the challenge, because the invisible man doesn't get any better throughout the course of the project. One of the mistakes that I see people make with this particular kind of client is they think that somehow the invisible man is going to get better. Like when we were dealing at the very beginning and I'm trying to get the proposal and that was hard to sign, it took them forever. Like they're going to get better once the project starts. And that's never the case. Like if they're busy now, they're going to be busy then. They will tend to disappear during the project as well. Now, the real problem with this is that they'll reappear during the project with unreasonable demands. And it sounds like this. You've sent them 800 emails asking for their content or this thing or the last picture or whatever before you can launch the site. And you don't hear from them for, 2 months. And then 2 months later, they call you up and they're mad. They're like, why isn't the website launched? You've had this thing for 3 months. And you're like, well, but I've been trying to, you haven't given me. They get angry when the timing gets critical. Now, this is when the invisible man turns into the stealth bomber and reappears and drops bombs all over your world. And I used to get so angry at these clients. I was like, why were they doing this to me? And the answer to that question is they were doing this to me because I let them. It's true. They did that to me because I let them. So that's where the fence of clarity comes into play. We need to create a process for dealing with disappearing clients and make sure the client understands the process. So in my contract, there's a very clear thing that says, look, at this certain time frame, your project is going to be considered suspended. And if you want to bring your project back into our active queue, then you have to do some certain things. And there's also another point that's further down the road that if we haven't heard from you and nothing happens, it's abandoned and all the money, you forfeited the money that you paid so far. Now, you need to communicate with the client throughout and make sure they understand where they are, but you also have to protect yourself from these clients that will disappear on you. I had a client once, this is a true story. I had a client disappear on me for 2 years and want me to finish the site at the rate that I promised them 2 years ago. And I'd raised my rates multiple times since then. And, the price that I'd given him then was, maybe just slightly over half of what I charged then. I just wasn't going to do it. I mean, the project has timed out. I'm sorry, but you have to have a process in place the client has agreed to in the contract if they're going to disappear. So clear wording in your contract describing projects delayed by the client. And then hold them to the consequences that their behavior requires. Otherwise, you're training them to misbehave again, and you are creating a monster. So we have to hold them to that promise. Now, one more little point on the containment strategy, especially in a delayed project. Clarity is critical because the longer a project takes, the more likely it is to go off the rails. The scope is going to change because more time has elapsed and maybe their business is doing some things that it wasn't doing when you first started. If you're a year into the project, there's new things that you've learned and they've learned and new things they've seen. The scope is going to change. The more longer a project takes, the more likely it is to go off the rails. That's why you need a clear scope of work and a clear process to deal with these disappearing clients. Okay. Second friendly monster. This is the question mark. The question mark has no idea what he wants, or he wants everything. He asks, I'm not sure what I want. I'll know it when I see it. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So they ask endless questions. They have no goals, no budget. If you've ever sat down with a client for what you thought was going to be like an hour-long consulting meeting, and 3 hours later you're looking at your watch and you're barely through your list, yeah, that's a question mark. Like they ask a million questions. This is the time you focus on commitment. These clients are classic time wasters. And if you're trying to be a nice person, they will let you invest hours in them before they ever make any kind of commitment back to you, like giving you a deposit or signing your documents. They just want to ask their questions and they're curious and they want to talk. So how do you deal with a client like this? So the first thing you can do is use an intake form. And before you meet with this kind of client, have them fill out a form on your website to at least, put a little bit of a barrier to test their commitment before you go any further. Another thing to deal with a question mark is get to price early. That's where that the statement that I gave you earlier, to work with me, the minimum price is blank. Or if we're getting into this conversation, I realize, okay, this person is really a question mark. I'm going to even say, look, what you're describing sounds like a, X number of dollar website. What I've learned is the best way to contain a question mark and keep a question mark fenced in. The best way to contain a question mark is with a dollar sign. As soon as you put a dollar figure on the table, the question mark tends to stop asking questions because it just got real, right? Now, the other thing you could do if they have legitimate questions is, okay, you're not ready for a website yet. There's lots of questions we have to answer. It's time for a discovery phase or a consulting agreement. And, a lot of people talk about those, and, it seems, especially if you've never done one before, it seems like a hard thing to get your mind around. It's basically a scope of work and a price, but the scope of work is, I'm going to help you find answers to these questions. I can't tell you how many times I've sat around a table at a coffee shop giving clients free advice on how to run their business, or like, I want to do an e-commerce store, and we'll talk through all these options about how they should ship and do tax and all this stuff, and they haven't committed anything back to me. Well, if the client doesn't understand that, it's time for a discovery phase to answer these questions for a set amount of dollars, and then we're ready for a website, right? So a lot of times the question mark is not ready for a website yet, and you just need to give them a dollar amount it's going to take for you to answer those questions so that they are ready for a website. Hope that makes sense. All right, third monster is the boundary buster. This guy really annoys me. The boundary buster, if you've been working with clients, you've probably had a person like this. This is the person that sends an email at 3 a.m. with another email to follow up at 7:30, like, why haven't you gotten this done yet? You ever meet with those? Oh boy. They have to have after hours meetings. Like, they make you go outside your normal way of doing things. They bust your boundaries. They work weekends and holidays, and you better too, right? And give me a break. Now, by the way, I used to really give in to these people because, like, there was something in me that needed for this kind of person to think I was really something. Like, my value came from what other clients thought of me. And that's self-destructive. That'll really kill you. But yeah, this kind of client is so difficult to deal with. But the way you deal with them is communication. First of all, clearly communicate how and when you work. I work during normal business hours. I do not work on weekends or holidays, period. That's just it. Now, if you need me outside of hours for a true emergency, like literally the world's on fire, that's fine, but it's going to cost double time. Like, my hourly rate for website stuff is $165 an hour, and it's going to cost double that if you want me outside of true business hours. Now, the problem with the boundary buster is many of the boundary busters we create ourselves. Let me tell you a story and see if it sounds familiar. One night, I'm sitting in my chair in our living room watching probably Netflix or something on TV. It's maybe 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the evening, right? And I've got my phone in my hand like we all do. I'm just kind of watching and, scrolling. And an email pops in from a client. Oh, hey, can you just log in and add this thing to my website? And I think through the process in my head of, oh, that just take me like literally 5 minutes. My laptop's ready. I grab my laptop, open it up, log into their website, change the thing, publish the button, send them an email back. Yep, done, no problem, gotcha. And I pat myself on the back for good customer service. Now, what have I just done? I've just told my client that I work at night, and if you email me at 9:30 at night, you can expect a response and immediate change of the website. You've just fed the mogwai after midnight. You have created a monster. We do that ourselves. So decide how and when you're going to work, and then do it. By the way, one of the great things that I use in my business is, and there's other apps that do this, but there is an email app that I use called Polymail, and Polymail lets you send later. And there's a lot of other email apps that do that, but if I want to work at night, great. I just don't want my clients to know that I'm working at night. So I'll type out responses and say, okay, send it 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. And it's one of the beautiful things that helps me kind of control my own time. Okay, moving forward. So if you get a sense that you're dealing with a boundary buster, and you usually feel these like right down deep in your gut, like, this is a hard person to deal with, set the tone. Do not let them bully you in the first meetings. Set the tone in your initial meetings about how and when you follow up, and then do not violate your own boundaries, because the boundary buster, he or she will test all of your fences. They're going to sniff around the borders of your fences, looking for places they can, weak spots they can go through. So don't break your own rules. Don't tear down your own fences. Sometimes you have to fire the client, and this is one of them. And just make sure that scenario is covered in your contract. This, by the way, I've noted here. This candidate is an excellent candidate for a PETA surcharge. If you're not familiar with the term PITA, it stands for pain in the asterisk. And so if I'm going to work with you, it's going to, I'm going to charge extra because it's going to be, you're going to make it worth my time. Anyway. Okay. Let's move to the final monster, and that is the drama queen. So, and again, this is gender neutral. There's plenty of drama kings out there. So here's how you can tell you're dealing with a drama king. Everything is an emergency. Like all their emails have capital letters and lots of exclamation points. And their favorite word is now. It's got to be done now. Can we get it done now? Is it not soon enough now? They worked with a previous web developer who did everything wrong. Okay. When I'm meeting with a client for the first time, either in person or in Zoom or whatever, and they start complaining about a previous web developer they worked with, okay, it's a full stop, and we're going to talk about that. Because now, by the way, I've been in the web world long enough to know that there are a bunch of really knuckleheaded web developers out there. We take on rescue projects a lot. The developers disappeared or whatever. And there's some projects we've taken, and I look at what this previous person did, and I'm like, you had to really try to build it this bad. This took effort to build it this bad. And so I know there's a lot of web developers out there that have problems. But it could also be that this is a client who cannot be pleased by anyone. And if I don't weed this client out early, then he or she is going to be sitting in front of another web developer 3 months from now complaining about me because I wasn't able to please him or her either. So complaints about a previous web developer, it's a red flag. We're going to stop and really dig into that. So how do you deal with a drama queen? If you've got one in your fences already, it's the documentation fence that's going to save you. System trumps drama. Stick to your system. When the drama queen starts, everything's terrible and the world's on fire and exclamation points and capital letters, refer them back to the contract they signed and the process they agreed to. Look, system trumps drama. When you can simply go back to say, I understand what you're saying, but this is the way we do the project. This is what you agreed to in the contract. Oh, I understand that you want that, but look, it's not included on the scope of work right here. Or in this meeting, we agreed to do it this way. This is one of those clients where you have to keep careful records, because the drama queen or king will say they want something one day and 2 weeks later forgot they ever had that conversation. So sending an email to you reminding them, it's back to system. You agreed here. And you can keep it very simple and, very low key, and just remind them, no, we're documented. We've got a system here. It really takes all the power out of their drama. So that's the drama queen. Now, in the middle of all this, you've heard me talk about it a lot. A solid contract is so very important when you're dealing with problem clients. You don't need a contract for good clients. You need a contract for bad clients. The problem is, you can't ever tell them apart really well at the beginning. So everybody's got to have a contract, right? We need a contract to protect ourselves, to spell out the fences and how things work, and have the client agree to those, all of our standards and our process at the very beginning. So I want to take just a second. There's a question that Nikki asked a minute ago. Can you provide us a template for a contract, including all the topics you mentioned? Yeah. So last year, I actually released my contract that I created over 26 years of working with clients into a product called Monster Contracts. It is worded for WordPress client work. If you work with another platform, it's easily just to find and replace on that. But what I learned as I worked with WordPress business owners over the years in coaching situations is that if they had a contract, it was either just a bunch of legalese they stole off the web and they really didn't even know what it meant, or it was just some basic language that didn't really cover them at all. And neither of those extremes is adequate for a growing business. So my contract, I've refined over the years. I put specific things in it that deal with all the areas of client work, the process, all the various things that we deal with as web developers. And this contract, again, it's called Monster Contracts now. It's battle tested. It's refined over more than 20 years of real client work. It's been analyzed by multiple attorneys over the years. Every year we have it audited by another attorney, and then we allow our members to add other suggestions as well. So there's a discount. If you're a GreenGeeks community member, you can get 20% off with GreenGeeks. This is not a hard sell. I just want to let you know that that's out there, because that question always comes up when we talk about problem clients, because that having a good contract is the key to surviving problem clients. Okay, well, let's open up for questions now, and happy to take those as we start to deal with problem clients. So there's a couple of questions here. Let's see. Federico asks, do you have Easter eggs in your contract? Federico, help me understand what you mean by Easter eggs. Or Anna or Erica, do you know what he might be talking about?
I'm not really sure. I'm not.
I mean, I love Easter eggs, but it may not be the kind that we're talking about here.
So he's saying in the chat things that only you would understand.
Oh, okay. Right. All right. So, in my contract, which is the monster contract, most of it is plain language. That's why it's the way this contract is built is that you can go in and change your process in plain language and then give it to an attorney in your area just to make sure all the legal pieces fit your area. And so it's really written in as, I mean, I say plain English. I'm not sure where you're located and what language you use, but it's very plain language. So there's Easter eggs, the way you're describing them, like things that only I understand, that would violate my law about, or my fence of clarity. Like, I don't want to hide any gotchas in the contract. Like, I want the client to understand what they're committing to and what I'm committing to. So clarity is critical, and that's really the role of the contract in your business. So I would really not recommend having Easter eggs, as you put it, in the contract. Really, honestly, because also, if you ever got sued and went to court, there's such a thing in the legal world called a meeting of the minds. And if you deliberately confuse or hide things in your contract, that can make the contract invalid. So again, I'm not a lawyer. That's a question for a lawyer, but I would really strongly encourage folks not to do that in their contract.
Thank you. There's another question from Mary Hill.
Yeah, Mary says, I have your book and found it very informative. Thank you, Mary. I've found recently clients don't want a maintenance contract. They want training so they can update their own site. What are your thoughts on this? Oh, yeah. So I will give here's what I'll do. And I use a little tool called the Website Owner's Manual, my friend Kyle Van Dusen put together. But basically, it's just a list of things that they need to do, a checklist of what they need to do to keep their website healthy and secure. So, Mary, here's the way I try to explain to people I coach how to deal with that situation. And it's like this. Okay, I've spent the last, I've been working with WordPress since 2008, exclusively since 2010. So a long time, 13-ish years working with WordPress. And you want me to teach you in an hour training what it took me 13 years to learn? I'm not going to do that. I'll provide a service, but I can't give to you, like I literally can't give to you my expertise in an hour of a training. Nor do I really want to teach you how to do this. If you want to do it and learn it, that's up to you. But, and so here's a list of things you need to do. You need to make sure your security stays up to date with these things. You need to have a daily backup, but I'm not going to tell them how to do it. I'll tell them what to do, but not how to do it. But so with a maintenance contract, the key to selling website care plans or maintenance plans or whatever you want to call it, the key to selling security and management for their website is education. And that has to start at the first meeting. So when I talk about pricing a website with a client, it is a build price and a management price. They're together. And I'll even tell the client, look, you need to, in this budget, you need to figure in, what it's going to cost for 12 months of website management. Our starting price is $119 a month. And just figuring what that's going to cost you for your first year. And if that exceeds your budget for the website, then we need to we need to pull some things out of the website build so you can afford the management. Then we can come back in and add those other things later, because website management is that important. You don't want to spend a bunch of money on a website and then not have it managed correctly. It's like buying an expensive car and then never giving it an oil change. It's crazy. You have to factor in all of those costs. So yeah, Mary, it's a common thing that people push back with. And I would just encourage you, education early. And then, I'm not going to train you how to do it. We don't provide that. Do you have any follow-up? Just ask it there in the chat. Shade has a question. What do you do with a client who has health issues, but uses that to delay sending what is required for months, even though you send them active and engaged on, you see them active and engaged on social media? Oh, that's such a tough one, Shade. Yeah. So, I mean, it would depend on the specific circumstance, but if I have a client who is stalled on content, my first response to them is empathy, because think about this. We get really frustrated at clients like, why can't you just write the thing? And then I remember, oh, wait, it took me like 9 months to build my last website for my business, and I'm supposed to be a professional, right? Like for me to write my own content about my own business took me forever. And what we forget is a lot of times when clients are trying to write about themselves and their business and whatever, number one, most of them aren't writers. And so it's something brand new to them. It's easy to kick down the road. Number two, if they're not really clear on their value proposition of what they're doing and why it's important and why people should choose them instead of their competition, it can send them into an existential spiral. And they just stall. And so that's why it's really helpful to come alongside and say, okay, look, we need, it's your website. You pay me a deposit. If you're doing content first, like I recommend, you've gotten your deposit. And so if they want to delay, I mean, I've gotten paid already. You want to have that stop, a pause, something in your contract to deal with suspended and abandoned projects. But then also any, delayed content is a problem in the process. And whenever you find a problem in your process, it's an opportunity to create a service to deal with the problem. So the service in this case is, let's provide content creation and partner with a writer or do it yourself if you can write. And, for an extra charge, we've been stuck here for 6 months, really for another $700, we can have a writer come in and help you write this. Why don't we do that? And just let them spend the extra money and do it.
Thank you. We have another question from Mary Hill.
Mary, do you have an example of the intake form you mentioned we can take a look at? Kind of. If you do a search on mastering the client consultation and my name, it'll pop up. It's at WordCamps and stuff, and there's a download. That talk is about that subject, mastering the client consultation. Nathan Ingram, just Google that, and it'll pop up, and there'll be links somewhere to download the slides and the one pager that has some suggested questions on it.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Nathan, can you tell us more about the template for the contract that Nikki had asked originally in the first question?
Yeah, so Nikki had asked about some kind of template for a contract that covered all of those things, and that is Monster Contracts. So the Monster Contract is a Word document that you can edit to match the way you do business. You can put your process in. It has all the other language that talks about website management and the various things like how do you handle third parties and SEO and images. And if you look at monstercontracts.com, it gives a kind of a summary of the areas that it covers, and you can just pick that document up and plug your logo and make some changes. There's a walkthrough video that will show you what you should change. And then now you've got a contract for your business. I strongly recommend that it gets vetted by a lawyer in your area, because it has been vetted for my area with my attorney, and it works for most places. And even in other countries, we've had people use that template in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in some European countries with very minimal changes from the attorney. And so with a template contract like this, it lets you, rather than hiring an attorney for 10 hours to create a contract for you, you can take them a template and just say, make sure this is all okay. And they charge you for 1 or 2 hours. So it's much less expensive to have a good legally vetted contract for your area.
Thank you. Thank you so much for explaining that. If there's no additional questions, we can do the raffle for your book.
Yeah. And I've got some wrap up as we're getting ready to stop.
Okay, so let's do the raffle and then we wrap it up.
Great.
Erica, to you.
Okay, we are going to do the raffle. I'm going to sharing my screen. We have 5 books, right, Nathan? 5.
Yes, 5, right? That's correct.
Okay. First winner, Mary. Okay. Okay. Second winner, congratulations. Michelle, congrats. 2 more. Gabby, congrats too. And Dave, congrats to everyone.
Thank you, Erica. We will contact the winners to get your mailing address, of course, so we can send you the book. Nathan, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah. Let me get back to my. Whoop, did that share the slides there? All right. So yeah, thanks everybody for hanging with me through this. Hopefully you picked up a few things. I just want to wrap up with this last challenge. If you were to consider just for a moment how much better your life would be and how much better your business would be if you took just a couple of suggestions from this webinar and built strong fences in your business. Picking just one or two things that you saw through the course of today. If you started to put those fences into place, how could things change in your business? Because one thing I've learned over the years is that good fences make great clients. And if you'll just take even a couple of suggestions that we saw in the last hour and put those into practice in your business, I think you'll see your relationship with clients really start to improve. So thanks again for hanging out with me for the last hour or so, and hopefully you found something useful. Thanks, Anna and Erica, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Erica. We'll see everybody at the next webinar.
Thank you, Nathan and Anna.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.